On the morning of April 12, 1981, a quiet mountain resort town in Northern California changed forever. Inside a small wooden cabin surrounded by tall pine trees, a scene of unimaginable violence lay waiting behind a closed front door. 3 bodies were tied up and brutally murdered in the living room. A 12-year-old girl was missing from her bed without a trace. Down the hallway, 3 young boys slept through the night, completely unharmed. More than 4 decades later, the bloody events inside Cabin 28 remain one of America's most haunting cold cases. This is the complete, documented history of the Keddie Cabin Murders. Keddie, California, was once a thriving railroad town in the Sierra Nevada mountains. By the late 1970s, the town had faded into a remote, low-income rental community. Visitors and long-term residents rented small, rustic cabins built decades earlier. The area was isolated, dense with forest, and far removed from the busy urban centers of California. In the fall of 1980, 36-year-old Glenna Sue Sharp, known to everyone as Sue, moved into Cabin 28. Sue had recently separated from her husband and relocated to Plumas County with her 5 children: John, Sheila, Tina, Rick, and Greg. Life in Keddie was simple and affordable, giving Sue a chance to rebuild her life on a modest income while raising her family in the quiet woods. Saturday, April 11th, began like any ordinary spring day for the Sharp family. Sue remained at Cabin 28 with her younger sons, 10-year-old Rick and 5-year-old Greg, along with their 8-year-old neighbor and friend, Justin Smartt. Sue's 12-year-old daughter, Tina, spent the afternoon watching television next door at Cabin 27. Meanwhile, Sue's 15-year-old son, John, and his 17-year-old friend, Dana Wingate, were seen hitchhiking back to Keddie from the nearby town of Quincy. Sue's 14-year-old daughter, Sheila, had arranged to spend the night with friends at Cabin 27. As night fell over the mountains, the residents of Cabin 28 went to sleep, unaware that an unthinkable crime was about to unfold. At approximately 7:50 a.m. on Sunday, April 12th, 14-year-old Sheila Sharp walked back to Cabin 28 to change clothes for church. She opened the front door and stepped into the living room. The room was dark, but the overwhelming smell of copper and blood immediately signaled that something was horribly wrong. On the living room floor, Sheila saw 3 motionless figures covered in blood. Frightened and in shock, she ran back to Cabin 27 to alert her neighbors. Neighbors rushed to the cabin and helped rescue the 3 young boys, Rick, Greg, and Justin, who were found alive and uninjured in a back bedroom. Police officers from the Plumas County Sheriff's Office arrived shortly after, stepping into one of the most violent crime scenes in the county's history. Investigators inside Cabin 28 discovered a scene of extreme savagery. The victims in the living room were identified as Sue Sharp, her son John, and John's friend, Dana Wingate. All 3 had been bound with medical tape and electrical wire. The physical evidence indicated that multiple weapons were used during the assault, including 2 different claw hammers, a heavy butcher knife, and a steak knife that was found bent from the force of the attack. Forensic examination revealed that the victims suffered blunt force trauma and multiple stab wounds. Blood was splattered across the walls, furniture, and ceiling. Yet, despite the extreme violence, the 3 young boys in the bedroom slept through the night. Strangely, 12-year-old Tina Sharp was nowhere to be found. Her bed was empty, and her shoes remained inside the home. The Plumas County Sheriff's Office immediately launched a full-scale homicide investigation. Search parties, bloodhounds, and helicopters swept the dense forests surrounding Keddie, looking for Tina Sharp or any discarded evidence. Federal and state authorities were called in to assist the small rural law enforcement agency. Investigators interviewed dozens of residents in the Keddie community. They searched for motives, but Sue Sharp had no known enemies, and there were no obvious signs of a robbery. Blood samples, latent fingerprints, and binding materials were collected from the cabin. Despite these efforts, early leads quickly dried up, and investigators struggled to establish a clear timeline of events or pinpoint a solid suspect. As the investigation progressed, Detectives focused heavily on two local men living nearby, Martin Smartt and Severin Boubede, known as Bo. Martin Smartt was a neighbor who lived in Cabin 26 and was the stepfather of 8-year-old Justin, who had slept through the murders in Cabin 28. Smartt was known to have a volatile temper and a background in military service. Boubede was a former convict staying with Smartt at the time of the murders. Both men were interviewed extensively by police shortly after the crime. During interviews, Smartt mentioned that he was missing a claw hammer, which matched the weapon type used in the murders. However, despite intense scrutiny and suspicious behavior from both men, law enforcement concluded there was insufficient physical evidence at the time to file formal criminal charges. For 3 long years, the fate of 12-year-old Tina Sharp remained a complete mystery. The search for Tina stretched far beyond Plumas County, generating national media coverage and countless tips from the public. Authorities considered the possibility that she had been kidnapped by the killers on the night of April 11th. The breakthrough came on April 22, 1984, more than 50 miles away in Butte County, California. A collector searching for discarded cans found a portion of a human skull near Feather Falls. Dental records confirmed the tragic truth. The remains belonged to Tina Sharp. The discovery confirmed that Tina had been taken from Cabin 28 on the night of the attack and killed elsewhere. Following the discovery of Tina's remains, the investigation stalled once again. Years stretched into decades with no new arrests. Cabin 28 stood abandoned for years, becoming an eerie landmark for curious onlookers and true crime enthusiasts before it was finally demolished in 2004. Over time, primary leads faded as key figures in the original investigation passed away. Martin Smartt died of cancer in 2000, and Boubede died in 1988. Neither man was ever charged in connection with the Keddie murders. The case file sat in the Plumas County Sheriff's Office, gathering dust as a cold case that seemed destined to remain forever unsolved. In 2013, the case received renewed attention when new law enforcement leadership reopened the investigation into Cabin 28. Detectives re-examined original case files, retested physical evidence using modern forensic technology, and uncovered previously overlooked records in county storage. Among the discovered evidence was an audio recording and a written letter from Martin Smartt to his ex-wife, written shortly after the murders. In the letter, Smartt wrote, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 lives." Investigators also discovered that a former therapist had reportedly told police in 1981 that Smartt had confessed to the murders during a counseling session, a detail that had not been fully pursued by investigators at the time. In 2016, a major piece of physical evidence was recovered from a creek near Keddie. A local resident using a metal detector located a rusted claw hammer submerged in the water. The hammer matched the exact description of the hammer Martin Smartt claimed to have lost in April 1981. Investigators sent the hammer and other original evidence, including medical tape and DNA samples, to advanced forensic laboratories. Modern DNA analysis revealed dynamic biological profiles on key evidence items. Authorities announced that multiple suspects, both living and dead, remained under active investigation, bringing fresh hope to a cold case that had been quiet for over 35 years. The Keddie Cabin Murders stand as one of California's most chilling unresolved crimes. 4 lives, Sue Sharp, John Sharp, Dana Wingate, and Tina Sharp, were brutally cut short on a spring night in 1981. The crime devastated a family, shattered a quiet mountain community, and left behind decades of unanswered questions. While key suspects have passed away, the investigation remains open. Modern forensic science, recovered evidence, and dedicated cold case investigators continue to work toward official resolution. Until that day comes, Cabin 28 remains a tragic symbol of lost innocence and an enduring quest for justice in the Sierra Nevada mountains.